My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me, and he said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
So glad to have you all here. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world in the chat room, whether you're watching us live on Rumble, on YouTube, on X. Let us know. We've got a very busy show for you on this Thursday. We're going to look at the big revelations on the January 6th cover-up and hoax as it relates to the pipe bomber and what we now know, according to FBI whistleblowers, as well as members of Congress, as this story continues to fall apart for the government. This January 6th narrative is quickly unraveling. This is an unbelievable story, so we'll bring you the latest on that.
Plus, who is the man who dares to run against Vladimir Putin? Is he the next Alexei Navalny? Do Russians really love him? Because if he's against Putin, our media is going to love him. We're inviting Mike Jones from Russia to tell us how popular is this guy? How much do we need to know about him?
I guarantee you this guy will be on the front cover of like Time magazine.
He will get an Oscar for making a movie about,
I just saw like Antony Blinken the other day on the front cover of Time magazine. I'm like, my God, they'll put Zelensky on there. This guy running against Putin will probably be on there. We'll get to that story.
That's going to be hard for Zelensky to be in that guy's shadow.
I know exactly. And we're also going to look at exactly. And
That's David's bird, by the way.
And we're also going to talk about Justin Trudeau and the ballot harvesting possibilities that could unfold with the election reforms in Canada. What is the Trudeau government trying to pull in Canada? By the way, Canada, don't they have one of the best election systems in the world? Like, why do we need to reform it and model it more after the United States? All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Bird is a weird animal to just randomly have. Like the one day we're sitting here talking, and David, it sounds like Star Wars guns, like pew 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 pew. I'm like, what is that? He's like, yeah, I got a bird. I'm like, what? When did you? It's like, yeah. I should have mentioned I also got a turtle. Like what?
It makes me like
alligator gets here next week.
It punctuates our good points whenever we make a good point. Pew pew. Good job.
Yeah, you're just watching this bird. We should be clear. You're just watching this bird temporarily, but it's hilarious. I'm like, when did you get a bird? Yeah, it's like we got snakes. Yeah, we got a very busy show for you on this Thursday. Thank you guys for joining us. Hey, by the way, because we support the farmers and all of these farmers' protests, I don't know if you've seen over the past 24 hours, multiple arrests now, farmers being arrested. Europe is rising up. These farmers all across Europe are rising up, from Liechtenstein to
Brussels. They're
Lithuania.
Being pushed back by police with rubber bullets at this point. The last we heard, we're going to bring you the story as it develops over the next, we've been following it for weeks and weeks, and it continues. Later today, we're supposed to hear from the German government about what they're going to do about it. Do they actually hear them? Is something going to happen? So we'll continue to follow that story.
But my point is that we have a new Redacted store. We have a brand new T-shirt that just rolled out, the No Farmers, No Food T-shirt. So we're really excited about this. I just ordered a short sleeve and a long sleeve version. Very exciting about this. I love the designs. Grim did the designs on this, and looks fantastic. So just head on over to redactedstore.com. You can check out all of our other merch over there as well.
It's masculine.
I will not comply T-shirts, the hoodies, the mugs. Yeah, it's masculine. Show that you're a man.
We should get some feminine belly shirts too, or something like that. Sometimes I'm like, I'm the only girl around here. I'm like, oh yeah, that's very manly. Okay, sure.
Get one of those like belly shirt ones you tie in the center, like the farmer girls.
We could do that.
Yeah, like a little cowgirl hat.
But you know what we could do? We could take the overalls off and have him just be bare-chested with the tattoo that says "No farmers, no food" for the ladies.
The bird likes that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I guess. Yeah. Just so it's for the ladies. It'd be a bare-chested farmer. Yeah.
Got it.
See, you're following.
But not for us to wear. All right. We'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
We'll work on the J-Lo brand.
All right. We've got a lot of news to get to. Let's get into it tonight, and let's talk about the January 6th pipe bomb narrative is about to collapse. The story is being buried, of course, by the mainstream media, so we want to shed as much light on it as possible here on Redacted. We now have some bombshell developments in the January 6th pipe bomb hoax and the FBI cover-up portion of the story that we want to bring to you. We now know incontrovertibly that the FBI participated in the smokescreen and potential cover-up of this hoax. We'll get to that part of the story in a moment. And we now know, by the way, the identity of the guy who was seen here tipping off police and the Secret Service about the pipe bomb. You can see him walking over to the police and then to the Secret Service and letting them know about that pipe bomb that was sitting on the bench of the DNC right out in front. We also now know that thanks to Congressman Thomas Massey last night, we know this about the backpack guy. Of course, all of this makes sense. So here is the backpack guy, the original backpack guy on January 5th, of course, dropping the bombs in multiple locations. Of course, all of this makes sense when you think about it for a second. Why can't the FBI track down and then you find backpack guy who planted the pipe bombs? They have video footage of the guy, as you can see right here, leaving the bombs. They have footage of him going to a car. They have footage of him using the subway. They have cell phone tracking data. He pulls the phone out while he's sitting on the bench. And the bomb component parts that would lead them directly to this guy. Now, according to former FBI agent, FBI bomb expert, those component parts are like having a fingerprint. You know exactly where they came from.
Every destructive device has a signature, and it's something that is pretty much unique to the person who put that bomb together. The components of the bomb, I've worked bombing cases in the past where the components have actually led us to the neighborhood of where the bomber was. Here, the FBI has the components. They've gone through them.
Yeah, they do. And it's really surprising that nearby the FBI, they use the exact same pipe bombs at their FBI training facility.
Yeah, but that guy's got a super stealth outfit of a gray sweatshirt and sweatpants.
Okay.
It's,
Yeah.
it's like ninja level disguise.
But the fact that these particular pipe bombs are the exact ones that they use at the FBI training facility nearby. Like,
yeah, that's also very fishy, isn't it?
Like, if you had to put this two and two together, you're like, okay, where did you come up with this idea? And oh, by the way, they don't work. They're not real pipe bombs. So where did you get these phony looking pipe bombs? Down to the wiring and the kitchen timers that the FBI uses down the street at their training facility. Where did you get these? So the FBI can continue this charade, and they don't know who this guy is. But of course they do. They know exactly who this guy is. But we're not stupid. They continue to spin this yarn. Why don't we know who the backpack guy is? Why don't they know who he is? The answer is because they don't want to let us know. They were involved, of course, from the very beginning in this cover-up and hoax, and they don't want us to know the involvement of this. Just for some context here, here is backpack guy.
Tonight, the FBI releasing new video of the person suspected of planting those pipe bombs the night before the Capitol riot. And the FBI officially confirming those pipe bombs placed at the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters could kill.
These pipe bombs were viable devices that could have been detonated, resulting in serious injury or death.
The video offering specific detail on the suspect's movements. At 7:40, the suspect seen walking along this residential street. Investigators interested in their somewhat unusual gait. Moments later, a person walking a dog passes by. By 7:52, the suspect has made it to the DNC headquarters. The suspect sits on a bench and appears to fumble with that backpack. A bomb is later discovered in the bush adjacent to the bench. At 8:14, the same suspect walking down an alley next to the RNC headquarters. A bomb placed there as well before exiting the area, walking past the Capitol Hill Club. The FBI hinting at a profile as it asks for the public's help.
They want your help until they don't. So here's the profile they put out, seeking information, pipe bombs in Washington, D.C. Here's the guy. Here are the sneakers. Here's the Nike Air sneakers, the Michael Jordan sneakers. Here are the pipe bombs that conveniently look exactly like the ones we use at our training facility down the street. According to friend of the show, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin, whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, American hero Kyle Seraphin, he led FBI surveillance teams. He told the Daily Wire that shortly after January 6th, a counterintelligence team met him at a firehouse in Falls Church, Virginia, to brief him on the next surveillance target. What was their next mission? Who was that target? Well, none other than the person of interest in the pipe bombing story. Was it the man himself? We don't know, but it was a person of interest. Kyle Seraphin was never confirmed as to whether or not this was the actual guy or not, but it was the person of interest. they had security footage that allowed Kyle and the team to follow this guy and backpack guy down into the metro station after he planted the bombs. And then they identified the fare card that he used to get on the metro. That fare card then allowed them to determine that the person got off a metro stop in Northern Virginia, where surveillance footage showed the person entering a car. Both the car and the fare card were then in the name of the same exact human being, who is a retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant, who is now working as a contractor with a security clearance, Kyle said. Now, Serafin and his team were assigned to stake out the person's row home for a number of days. They were watching him. But the FBI then blocked the request to interview this person. And then they were called off the target. Nope, all right, you're done. You got a little too close to the stove. Completely taken off the case, and then sent to look into other January 6 individuals who were just around the Capitol that day. Other, as Kyle described it, low priority targets. You're literally watching the guy who planted the bombs. Probably person of interest. But you're pulled off of that. So what happened? Well, higher ups told them to stand down. Nothing to see here. I guess they were running this like charade and thought, well, that's enough. An even bigger bombshell, though, was dropped last night by Congressman Thomas Massie. Actually, I don't know that it's a bigger bombshell. They're both huge, right? Who is the mysterious guy tipping off police? You can see here in just moments, he walks up to, of course, the police car, and then in the black car, here he comes. This is the other backpack guy. He walks up and lets the police know at 1:05 p.m., precisely the same time that stuff was happening at the Capitol building, right? So he there talks to the police officers. They don't do anything. They continue eating their lunch and they sit there for another few minutes. Oh, there's a pipe bomb over there on the bench right next to our cars. And oh, and by the way, Kamala Harris is in the building. That's her Secret Service detail.
That's cool.
So then he walks around the other side and then nothing happens.
I'm going to finish my lunch.
I'm just going to hang out for another few minutes. Nothing big deal. So who is this mysterious guy tipping off police that there's a pipe bomb? Well, Thomas Massie asked FBI Director Christopher Wray that very question. Who is this guy, and why won't you tell us who he is? Watch.
Who walked by that bench and then went up to the police and the detail. Didn't do that accidentally. They had a purpose in mind, and that what transpired after that was the result of information that person gave to them. If that person found the pipe bomb, would they be a suspect?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate about specific individuals. I will tell you that we have done thousands of interviews, reviewed something like 40,000 video files, of which this is one, assessed 500-something tips.
Have you interviewed that
the
person?
Devices. We have conducted all logical investigative steps and interviewed all logical individuals at this point.
Then you need, it's 900 days. You need to tell us what you found, because we're finding stuff you haven't released into the public.
So, of course, that was last July. Well, Massie finally found out who he was. Who was that guy? Who was Backpack Guy? And told Matt Gaetz this last night on his show. Watch.
You recently met with Capitol Police.
Correct. Today.
And what did you learn in that meeting?
I learned that Backpack Guy, January 6th Backpack Guy, not to be confused with January 5th Backpack Person. Backpack Guy was a non-uniform, plainclothes police officer in the employ of the Capitol Hill Police.
What?
The person who found the pipe bomb, the person who, D'Antuono, who was leading the investigation, say, oh yeah, the person who found it, it'd be investigation 101, that they would be a suspect initially until ruled out. You're saying that person was an undercover, plainclothes Capitol Police officer, and the Capitol Police confirmed that to you today?
They confirmed that to me today, yes.
Okay.
What? I mean, what? And so to Thomas Massie's point, what the hell? It seemed like when he was interviewing Chris Wray, he said, this guy had a purpose. He knew exactly what he was doing. He walks up, he sees this pipe bomb, he goes directly to the police, he goes right to then he has the wherewithal. Like, if you don't know who these people are, right, do you think to also go to the black car and talk to the Secret Service? No, you're like kind of panicking. I don't know what you're going to do. He knows exactly where he's going, what to do. And it's precisely at the same time that stuff is happening at the Capitol building. What the hell? So this is an unbelievable story. Darren Beattie, of course, from Revolver News, who has been all over this story from the very beginning. He has kept this story front and center like no one else. He's done an amazing job. Darren's going to be on the show next week. Darren said this last night. He said, the plot thickens. Damning new details emerge in the January 6th pipe bomb cover-up. Before learning of the information in this piece, we would have said the chance of January 6th pipe bombs being a hoax and cover-up were 99%, leaving a 1% chance that some bizarre, exotic, but plausible and innocent explanation could be given for the anomalies we've covered. Now we're in a position to rule out the remaining 1% of doubt. The January 6th pipe bombs are 100% a hoax and 100% a cover-up. What's more, we know who is covering it up. Stay tuned, he says. When this fully blows up, it'll be the biggest story in the country and the biggest scandal in recent American history. Of course, the mainstream media won't cover the story.
They don't give a crap.
They don't give a crap, but we do, and we're going to continue to stay on this story. I said Darren Beattie from Revolver News is going to join us next week here on the show as this story develops. I mean, there's a couple of, we have so many questions about it, right? But one thing that absolutely stands out to me, the Secret Service, and if I've gone to presidential events, I've covered presidential speeches, of course, and the Secret Service arrives 3 days ahead of time to do sweeps to secure the area, right? And not every situation can they do that. Big events, of course, they're doing that. But Kamala Harris, Vice President-elect, is there in the building. The Secret Service arrived hours beforehand to do a sweep of this building. They're literally parked right next to a pipe bomb. Really? The Secret Service is parked next to a pipe bomb. And it wasn't like it was hidden in the bushes. It was out in plain sight by the park bench.
And there's footage of them actually letting kids walk across the street right past where the bomb is.
Exactly. Not before. After that backpack guy goes up and tells them, yes, you see a group of school children just walking casually across the street, and they are there. The Secret Service just standing there on the street. Now, I've heard people say, well, they didn't want to probably panic and panic children. No, you don't have to panic anybody, but just directing the children away from the scene. Like, that's not like, oh my God, there's a bomb. They're not going to do that. But they could say, children, we kindly ask you to cross over the other side of the street. And police officers are driving by. There's a police car that drives by up the street on its way to presumably to the Capitol building. You don't mean you could park one of those SUVs right there blocking that intersection? It's
I'm sorry, but an unknown explosive device, if you know there's an unknown explosive device, that's one of those points where I think you don't want to tell people, no, calmly, just walk. It's like, get out of here.
Get the heck out of here.
You want people panicked at that point. Get the heck out of here. Go. It's not like, okay, everybody just calmly walk the other way. We've got an unknown explosive device. No, panic. That's a good time for it.
Yeah. And also think about it as a father, right? What I would do if I saw children walking towards a bomb. Right. I would go out in the middle of traffic and stop people from driving, and I'd direct the kids down the block. Yeah. I wouldn't want to panic them. You got to run right now, kids. You 7-year-olds. But I'd run the other way and carry these kids out of here.
It's human instinct to know if there's danger in this direction, stop other humans going that direction.
Right. It's instinctual.
My 7-year-old, we were on a walk and there was a bear. And we turned around, there was a lady running, and she was like this, we got to stop that lady from running towards the bear. Like, a child knows this, right? You don't let people go anywhere near danger. We all should know this collectively.
It's an unbelievable story, and the fact that we know who this guy is. We know who this bomber is at this point, right? You have the FBI trying to hide this now, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time now until we get a name. But I think the revelation, though, that we learned from Kyle Seraphin is amazing, that this guy was retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant who is now working as a contractor with a security clearance. Okay. One of the biggest cover-ups, and as Darren Beattie said, one of the biggest scandals in American history. We'll see if the American media, the Western media, covers it. It's an unbelievable story. Let us know your thoughts on this story. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday.
Right, so we're going to talk about who is this man who dares to try to run for president in Russia against Vladimir Putin. The Western media will no doubt be making him a media darling. I use this phrase a lot. The chat room doesn't like it when I use it. I don't mean we love these people. I mean the media loves these people and tries to assume you do too. That's the correct use of media darling, right? I
Yeah.
love when we play this game. This is my favorite game.
Maybe you could
Come
choose
up
another
with a media darling. Oprah Winfrey. Go ahead, Clayton.
Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama. David, come on. Media darling. Favorite game.
Zelensky.
Zelensky. Yeah. Philip.
Oh, David just took mine. Let's say Bill
I'll
Nye.
get back.
AOC. Yeah, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Science K. Okay. All right. So anyway, we're going to see who this new media darling is going to be shoved down your throat coming up in a minute. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Bio Optimizers, because if one of your New Year's resolutions is to be healthy and sleep well, of course, you know you need to get restful sleep. And a great way to do that is by taking magnesium in order to have optimal sleep. Now, let me tell you, I took this last night because I was obsessed about a leak in my backyard. Stupid, but I just couldn't sleep. I found myself counting sheep at 1:30 in the morning. So I reached for my magnesium breakthrough. I took them, and then I was out in minutes, even though I was so fixated on this stupid little thing. And I was like, this is not going to work. I was out. It worked. I'm telling you. There are 7 different forms of magnesium in this supplement, and they're involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. Pretty much every function in your body gets upgraded when you take magnesium, but you know what it feels like when you don't sleep, when you stay up wondering about a leak in the backyard, then you feel like crap the next day. So this helps everything from metabolism to stress levels to just stopping to fixate on the leak in the backyard. You can see I'm not doing a good job of it right now. And let's face it, even if your 2024 resolution is not to focus on your health, but how are you going to achieve all your big goals? Take names, kick butt, without quality sleep and stress management. So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Just go to biooptimizers.com/redacted right now. Enter promo code redacted to get 10% off your order. Once again, that's biooptimizers.com/redacted. Who is the man who dares run for president against Vladimir Putin? Boris Nadezhin is raising signatures to make a run for the presidency. That means our Western media will love him automatically. They're calling him the anti-war candidate, that he's risking his life by running for president. Joining us from Russia is Redacted correspondent Mike Jones to break down these headlines. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the media is saying that people are risking their very lives and safety by even signing up to support this guy. So can you tell us, is that the case? Is that what you see in Moscow? And who is this guy? Can you give us a brief summary?
Well, first of all, this guy was not just a new name for me. I actually asked around other Russians saying, forgive my ignorance, but who is this guy Boris Nadezhin? Roughly translated, his surname means hope in Russian. And the answers that I've received are, we don't know. And this was actually admitted in, I believe it was a Washington Post article, where it said that most Russians don't know of this man, much less care for him. The Washington Post was trying to style this as a protest vote of some sort, given that Nadezhin is promising to not only end the SMO and enter peace talks with Ukraine, but also release political prisoners, including the West's darling Alexei Navalny, of course.
Okay, let me just clarify. When you say SMO, that's what we call the war in Ukraine. In Russia, it's called the Special Military Operation, the SMO. And Alexei Navalny also presented as what I like to refer to as a media darling, means the media loves him and tells you should love him, when he only has about a 3% support and only in urban centers in Russia. So he's only a media darling in the West. I'm sorry I interrupted, but go ahead.
No, thank you for clarifying. Yes. And again, with the case of Navalny, often labeled the opposition leader, which then betrays the West's lack of knowledge of the support of parties in Russia. We have Putin's party, obviously with the majority, the second, and what you would clarify or classify as the opposition being the Communist Party. Navalny, as far as I know, is not a communist. However, the West incorrectly labels him as this opposition leader. That leads us to these other candidates. You and your audience may recall Ekaterina Duntsova, a female journalist who came out of nowhere, very similar manifesto, ending the SMO, the Special Military Operation, the conflict in Ukraine, and yada, yada, yada. She, by her own admission, made a mistake in filing her application to be a candidate and was therefore refused. The West, of course, jumped upon that immediately, saying this was evidence of corruption and rigging elections. And now we have Boris Nadezhdin, who, again, has just come out of nowhere, actually a physicist by training, and served one term in the State Duma 20 years ago. So he's been recycled and placed here. He's being stylized again as this protest vote against Putin. But as soon as the West holds anyone like Duntsova or Nadezhdin now up on a pedestal, that's actually highly counterproductive to the Russian people. Once they see that, that arouses suspicion. They therefore know this person is quite possibly a Western shill. Now, if I use a reverse analogy, look what happened to Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson in the West as soon as Dmitry Medvedev praised their words or actions. They were immediately labeled Putin puppets and shills for Russia and propagandists. We see the same effect now that's rapidly coming into Russia, where as his name, Nadezhdin, is being repeated and certainly publicized in Western media, it arouses that same suspicion in the Russian people. Now, for the West to then claim about, oh, how come he hasn't been jailed and all these things, which he is saying, oh, I don't know why I haven't been treated the same way as Navalny. The West tries to make that out like, oh, wow, yes, he's a real truth teller and he's risking his life. He's in jeopardy. Absolutely not. Again, let's look at the other facts. In recent polling, President Putin has an above 80% approval rating and has collected, as an independent candidate, it has to be noted, 3.5 million signatures to support his candidacy. Why would you need to rig any elections, and why would you be threatened by some outsider who's just come out of nowhere? The Russian people, as I've said in previous interviews with you, have it's been proven to them that Putin was right in the past when perhaps they didn't believe him. The West, in the way they've treated recently Russian athletes, stripping them of medals, it's very clear to Russians what the West thinks and feels about them. And then we have in these Western articles talks of expats, Russians who have fled. Now, that's quite possibly true that Russians in places like Tbilisi in Georgia and other countries, maybe they are signing up for this guy. And again, as the Washington Post said, they don't know who he is. They just know that he's against Putin. So the risk is, however, that with funding and support outside of Russia, it could, by Russian laws, be seen as a foreign agent. And especially if you're donations, there is a finite sum that can be raised. I've had the same problem when raising donations for Donbass. And that is a legitimate protection and mechanism against NGOs and other interfering organizations in Russia. And of course,
Right.
we can predict how the West might react if Nadezhdin is found in breach of such mechanisms and laws.
Oh, they won't care. Alexei Navalny is foreign supported, has accepted aid from United States linked agencies. So no, they don't care about that at all. If you want to know the truth about Alexei Navalny, I refer to the great Jacques Bode book about Alexei Navalny and how much of a joke it is. Now, you and I, speaking of funny jokes, we had a little chuckle over this CNN piece that presented it as dangerous to oppose and run against Putin at all. The reporter asks a hilariously led question saying, why is the Kremlin allowing you to run? Is it a ploy to make it look like democracy? I present you this question. Is it maybe democracy? I want to show this little clip, and then as we come back, you can respond to that.
He has united the old guard of the Russian opposition, including key allies of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, his wife Yulia adding her signature on Wednesday, and exiled oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He's now racing to collect the required 100,000 signatures with strict regional quotas by the end of January. People are saying that there's a deal perhaps with the Kremlin to allow your campaign to go ahead to create the illusion of a real democracy, or that they are using this as a way to distract the anti-Putin electorate. What do you say to those theories?
I am absolutely sure the situation will change, because a lot of people now in Russia, which started to see me in YouTube, in TV, in Telegram, they begin believe me.
Yeah, that is rather farcical, isn't it? Gosh, choice. And again, let's not forget that the Communist Party is also running. Their candidate has been put forward, among other parties as well. So yes, there is choice, but the truth is the overwhelming majority of the country is very clearly supporting President Putin. And that's not because they have any guns pointed at them or they're told on media what to think. That is because they're seeing the as I've said, the Western actions and the benefits to the Russian economy. The IMF now has revised its forecast and increased it, I believe, to 2.6% growth for the Russian economy. What's not to like about that with this low unemployment? Okay, it's causing problems for Nabulina in the central bank with inflation, but wages are going up. The state subsidies for families, that's also being indexed and increased. So life is improving for Russians. Why would you then change course and skip to an unknown, untested individual and just roll the dice on that person in the middle of a very serious existential threat to the country? I don't think that's really a wise choice, and it's thoroughly understandable why people would stay with the tried and tested candidate, especially for now, until things are going. The CNN article talking about how, Russians would want the conflict to end and, the territories returned. I don't believe that for 1 second. The people of the new territories, they wouldn't want to go back to the Kiev regime. They've suffered that for 10 years. And if you're to believe the Western reports of all the horrendous losses that Russia supposedly suffered from across the country as well, many volunteers coming from the other side of the world almost, over near Vladivostok and these other poorer districts as well, volunteering for very good money, around 200,000 rubles a month. Do you think those families, if they have lost people, would just go, yeah, never mind, we'll go with Nadezhdin. He's better than Putin. At least the conflict will stop. I don't think so. I think once this blood has been spilled, people want to see it through to the end, and ideally to a comprehensive, decisive victory, as is predicted and forecast.
Right. And so when the Western media is calling this guy the peace candidate, the anti-war candidate, what CNN tells us is that he will immediately go to peace talks with Ukraine. It's as if they've studied zero, because Putin has been continuously offering peace talks, and it's Vladimir Zelensky who has outlawed them, who has signed a law saying that it is illegal in Ukraine to attend any peace talks with Russia. So how would this guy get Zelensky to the table when Zelensky has tied himself to the floor?
I believe the devil is in that part where Zelensky outlawed peace talks with President Putin. It was specifically with Vladimir Putin whilst he's in power in Russia. So you can see where the West wants that regime change so badly. So that is the small detail as I understand it as well. And you're absolutely right. And there's no admission or acknowledgement of the Istanbul peace talks around March last year, around at the beginning of the SMO, where it could have all been resolved. Potentially, there was a draft initial agreement, which President Putin held up at one of his conferences. We got this far before it was torpedoed by Boris Johnson and those who offered this blank check to Zelensky. So yeah, there's this talk of peace talks, and it's still to this day, President Putin has not ruled out the possibility or even the desire to reach a peaceful conclusion.
Right. And also it's worth pointing out that Parliament in Russia voted for the special military operation at the request of the mayors in the Donbass region. It was not just the whim of Vladimir Putin, who likes war and thought that would be a fun way to spend the next 2 years. So, it's missing context, and they treat us like we're stupid. So we're not stupid. Thank you so much for joining us. I always appreciate your context from the ground in Russia. You can follow Mike Jones on Earl Grey on Rumble and his Telegraph channel as well. Sorry. Thank you so much for joining us on Redacted today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thanks to Mike Jones covering that from Russia, where he tells us what people actually think there. I told you, media darling, we're about to see more of this guy.
Yes, we will. He'll be on the cover of Time Magazine or Newsweek.
I just don't know. I just don't know if he has the charisma, though. I look at the guy and I'm like, I don't know about media darling. So we'll see. We'll see how they spin it.
Right. Well, Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because from what I saw, he just doesn't The guy just doesn't really ring as like that charismatic. You know, maybe if he put on a green T-shirt, maybe, but I don't know.
Right. One of the things that Alexei Navalny did so well is use Instagram and social media. And this guy said, well, I got YouTube. Maybe that's why they, you know, that's why they know me so well. That's why I'm resonating. I got some YouTube. So he's using a play out of Alexei Navalny's book, but he does not have the sort of, the supermodel look that Alexei Navalny can have when he looks brooding and running from the government and poisoned.
And not being poisoned.
Right, not being poisoned. So anyway, let us know what you think of that. We have more news to get to. We're going to talk about changes to the election in Canada. Why do they need to do this? Is it because Trudeau is unpopular? We read your comments. We know exactly what you think of that. Also, is the UK coming up with a way to trick young kids into the army with a little summer camp for teenagers? We're going to talk to Jim Ferguson about that. But first,
yeah, I don't know if you saw today, UPS laying off 12,000 people. 12,000 people. And you know
Deutsche Bank, 3,500. Yeah.
You know it's a problem. And the reason they're saying that this is happening right now in the economy is because people aren't buying things. They're not shipping boxes. It's the cardboard box effect. And so fewer people buying things, fewer boxes being shipped, fewer cardboard boxes being ordered, then therefore UPS has to lay off 12,000 people, they say. And yesterday, of course, Jerome Powell speaking, and friends, we were watching it saying, I've never seen him like this kind of unsure. He seemed very off, very weird yesterday. Rate cuts could be coming here in May. But very weird data coming out right now, and very weird sentiment also unfolding from the Federal Reserve and what's going to happen in the U.S. economy, which is why I would never want my family's future tied to, the stock market where I have everything invested or anything like that, or have my entire family's future tied to the U.S. dollar or any dollar for that matter. Every government currency in world history has failed. That's why we believe in investing in gold and silver as a big part of our investment strategy, not as a way to, see wealth growing like crazy, numbers going up and up and up, like silver prices skyrocketing, gold prices skyrocketing, although that has hit, nearing all-time highs. That's not the reason we do it. We do it to preserve our family's wealth. Like we've worked for many, many years. I worked my ass off most of my life, waking up at 3 a.m. to make money for my family and work very, very hard. I don't want it all lost because the US dollar loses value. So taking a few of your hard-earned dollars and converting it into gold and silver, that's what our friends over at Lear Capital can help you do. And right now, they're putting together a free $3,600 gold kit. It's totally free. It's a totally free report that you guys got to go and check out. So go to their website, learredacted.com, to get the free gold report. You can also call their 800 number. Just tell them I sent you. Here's their 800 number right here on your screen, 1-800-613-3557. And when you're on the phone with them, say, hey, Clayton sent me. I want my free $3,600 gold report, and they will give it to you. They're fantastic people over there. Patriots. These guys are patriots. Look at the thousands of 5-star reviews that they have on Trustpilot. These guys have been doing this for decades. They're fantastic. They'll ship the gold and silver right to your front door, or you can have it held off-site in a storage facility that's protected under armed guard 24/7. Totally up to you how you want to do it. But again, call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557. Convert part of your U.S. dollars into gold and silver to protect your family, or go to their website, learredacted.com. Well, is the Trudeau government in Canada about to open the door to ballot harvesting? Well, it certainly looks that way. Ballot harvesting, for the uninitiated, is the idea of an individual or a group of individuals go out and they collect a lot of these paper ballots. Think of it this way. They might go to a senior center or something like that, gather up 300, 500 ballots, and then bring it to a drop box or other collection point out there. In other words, a person drives all over and gathers up as many ballots as they can and brings them to these drop boxes. So what could possibly go wrong with that system? How do we know those ballots actually came from the individuals they said they came from? New video emerged from Bridgeport, Connecticut recently showing a person dropping hundreds of ballots into a drop box at 5 a.m. And she keeps coming back and shoving more ballots in the box. Again, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about here. Perfectly normal behavior at 5 a.m. So what is Justin Trudeau trying to do with election reforms in Canada, and will it open the door to ballot harvesting? David Creighton has been following the story, independent journalist from Canada in Ottawa, who writes at the Post Millennial. David, do you think, first of all, this is going to open up the door for ballot harvesting there? And then secondly, what exactly is the Trudeau government trying to do with election reforms?
What's particularly worrisome about this, Clayton, is that these are secret negotiations going on between the Trudeau government and his intergovernmental affairs minister, Dominique LeBlanc, very close friend of the prime minister, and the NDP, which is, of course, another opposition party, which just happens to be the de facto coalition partner with the Liberals. The NDP, a socialist party, outright socialist party, has been propping up the Trudeau government now for a couple of years, and they have promised to do that until the next election. So they're meeting in secret, talking about so-called electoral reform. But is this not just election corruption, election fraud? Because they're specifically talking about three things. They want a longer period of voting, up to at least 3 days. They want people to be able to vote at any polling station. And they want this to be focused on mail-in voting, which, of course, as you mentioned from the start, this to me is all about ballot harvesting. Because the more that we emphasize mail-in voting, the greater potential we have for abuse, and we have for people to be voting more than once, and for tampering to occur. We know that when these political operatives drop by somebody's house to pick up their ballots, there's no guarantee that those ballots aren't going to be tampered with when they get to the voting area. And this is what worries me. But Justin Trudeau's been talking about electoral reform since 2015. And he's been talking about totally changing the system. He's even mused about going to a proportional representation system of government, which, of course, is nothing we've ever had in Canada. They have those kinds of systems in Europe. They usually lead to fractured governments. That, of course, has been discussed in the US as well. But what I think is going on here, and it's quite clear, Justin Trudeau is at the end of his political rope, not just as prime minister, but leader of the Liberal Party. And I think this is a last-ditch attempt for him to cling to power by corrupting a political system, an electoral system that is probably one of the best in the world in terms of its integrity.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you, which is there a demand for this in Canada? I mean, when you look at Canada's elections, I don't think I ever hear of, thoughts about fraud or comments about election integrity or problems with the Canadian election. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough, but are Canadians salivating at the idea of election reform?
Absolutely not. And in fact, I actually worked for Elections Canada during the 2015 election. I was asked to be a poll manager, which is somebody who ensures the integrity of a polling station and has everybody in place. And Elections Canada oversees all the federal election from province to province, from British Columbia to Newfoundland. So there are not 12 or 14 different kinds of federal elections. There's a unified way of doing the election. And it's very simple. People have to be citizens. They have to present their ID, which has to be a valid driver's license or other thing. And they're not allowed to vote. They have to have their face uncovered to prove that they are the person they say they are. And they only get to vote once, of course. But what makes the system so incredibly transparent is that people literally are given a paper ballot. They're pointed to a secret ballot place and they say, put your X beside the candidate of your choice with this pencil. The ballot is then taken from the individual by Elections Canada employee. It's folded and put in the ballot box while the voter watches the procedure. And when those votes are counted the same night, and we get election results not 3 days later, we get them the same night when Elections Canada volunteers and workers count those ballots, and those results are then scrutinized by every political party participating in the process. So the end result is an election that's fair, that's free, and that is competently run. So there's no sense at all of fraud going on because we all know the system is transparent and the system works. And so matter whether or not you win or lose the election, you know it was run fairly and honestly. So there's no need for reform of the system. It works properly. And you hear a lot about the Dominion voting system and how some people have questioned that. I won't go into length about that.
Right.
But Dominion voting systems actually comes out of Toronto, but it doesn't have anything to do with Canadian elections because up until now, we have maintained Canadian elections to be paper-based. Fill in your ballot with a pencil, put it in the physically put it in the ballot box so you know you voted fairly and legally. So no, there's no call for Canadians to change the system.
It's unbelievable. Why fix it if it ain't broke, right? Also, you guys use identification. That's amazing that you require individuals to show identification before voting. To me, that sounds incredibly racist. So I can't believe Canada is such a racist country to require you to show your identification.
And that's never been an issue here. That's the amazing thing because, of course, in the United States, there are calls for illegal immigrants to vote. There's objections to people presenting ID, like all races don't have access to identification. It's so ridiculous. I mean, you can't buy booze without identification.
Right.
You can't. And why is it suddenly it's a racial issue to have people identify themselves? It's never clicked in Canada. That argument has never been a part of the narrative here. Of course, Trudeau will make that part of the narrative. I've no doubt. Suddenly, it's going to be racist to ask people to present ID. As nonsensical as that is, Trudeau will definitely go there if he wants to corrupt a voting system that works quite well. And it's not going to work very well for him in the next election simply because his unpopularity is so high and because he's not going to be electing as many Liberal MPs as he has in the past.
Yeah, I see no reason for Canada to make this shift. And you move towards this massive focus on mail-in ballots being sent in. I wonder, though, when I lived in Montana, hardy individuals who still managed to get out even in snowstorms. I remember covering one election when I lived in Helena, Montana, in the snow. Didn't stop people from getting out there, getting the snow blowers out and getting to the polling places and managed to vote. Canada has way more snow, has to deal with much more inclement weather during elections. Has this ever been a major problem where you're looking across the country in Canada and saying, you know what, so many people just simply cannot vote because of inclement weather or some other reason, even though, we have this voting period. So we need to extend mail-in balloting. We need to push this now because this is a major problem for Canadians.
Well, once again, there's been no hue and cry over the weather. Largely elections in Canada occur in the spring, summer, and autumn because there's some common sense about February is probably not the best time to have an election.
Right.
But even more than that, we do have early voting in Canada. I mean, people can vote 2 weeks before if it's not convenient. And there are a couple of days set aside for that already. But the point is, it's not a mail-in ballot. You have to physically show up at the ballot box, at the voting area, and physically present your ballot. You have to vote in person. So we have never in Canada emphasized mail-in voting as a solution to any problem because it simply hasn't been a problem. And that is why anybody who knows Justin Trudeau has to be extremely suspicious about this going on right now because he's got about a year and a bit before the next election. He has enough time to totally screw up Canada's electoral process. Calling it electoral reform, he has enough time to make a very good system, a symbol for the world. In fact, in terms of how elections should be run, it's one thing Canada does well. A lot of things we don't do well. Healthcare is one of them. But we have a very good electoral system, and the integrity has never seriously been in doubt. So if Justin Trudeau wants to play with that system, obviously it's for his usual reason, which is self-aggrandizement, protecting his own power. No question in my mind about that.
Well, Trudeau seems to be taking a card out of the United States playbook right now, pulling a United States election reform scam. That seems to be what's going on here. Well, get ready, I guess. Your identifications up there are going to be racist and ballot harvesting. This could open the doors for ballot harvesting. We'll keep our eyes on Canada and what this means for the Trudeau government and beyond. David, great to see you. Thanks so much for this. Interesting and fascinating to hear that sort of behind the scenes on Canada's election process and voting process. Thanks, David.
We'll keep you informed, Clayton. Thank you so much again.
All right. Thanks so much, David. I mean, it is crazy when you think about it. You have this amazing election system and you use paper ballots and you use this great system and people have to show their ID before they can vote. Why are you converting to mostly mail-in? That's your focus, a mail-in ballot situation and ballot harvesting situation where people can come and gather up all of these ballots and bring them in. It's unbelievable.
Is it to cheat? Do you think? Could it be because
They're
of that?
inspired by 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
They're inspired by Joe Biden. They're inspired by America. They're inspired by our fantastic election system. Anyway, we've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look at the United Kingdom and why they're feeling the need to raise a citizen army. They're trying, their recruitment numbers are in the toilet. So can we get citizens to rise up and join the army? And through a little tricky scheme we're going to tell you about in just a moment. But first,
we want to tell you about our newsletter because we haven't talked about this just yet. You can find our free newsletter over at redacted.inc. It's totally free. Nothing's behind a paywall. Nothing is an upsell or a cross sell or an undersell or any kind of sell. No selling of any kind. It's free. You just go put in your email address and authenticate it. We write about the same stories that we're going to talk about later in the show. We also link you to other stories that we find of interest that we may not be able to get to on the show. So it's a good way to sort of get a global look at what's happening around the world to the best of our ability, what we think we need to draw your attention to, and is a great way to find original links to the sources that we talk about because we want to make sure that you can inform yourself, read for yourself, form an opinion for yourself, and then come here to tell us what you think about these stories, not just hear what we think. Your opinion is very important. It guides how we see things. It guides how we cover things. We really, really appreciate you. So subscribe to the newsletter. Share it with your friends. Totally free. You can find it at redacted.inc. Once again, the newsletter, totally free. Redacted.inc. Is the UK building out a citizen army? They started to say that last week. Now a new plan seems like they have a way to trick young kids into the military after they finish secondary school, or what we would call high school in the United States. According to the Daily Mail, military officials have suggested this idea of a course over the summer holidays, giving young adults a taste of service in the military, kind of like a boot camp. The worry is that once they do this, they are considered former military members. And according to the Daily Mail, that would give the defense secretary powers to recall them in case of a great emergency, which we are constantly sold everything as a great emergency. Joining us to discuss it is Jim Ferguson. He is a former parliamentary member, also the founder of Freedom Train International. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you think that I am being panicked here, or does this in fact seem like a trick to get young kids into the military?
My pleasure being here. Thanks, Natalie. No, I don't think you're worrying unnecessarily at all. I think we all should be very concerned about this. Look, I come from a long line of military service, and ordinarily a proposal like this would be something that I would support, because the British military in particular is one of the finest militaries in the world. They have fantastic discipline and training, and it's a great way for young people to go in and learn new skills. But that's not what is the purpose behind this. We know for a fact that our government, although they're called the Conservative Party or the Conservative government, they are not conservative at all. In fact, they are a globalist entity, that are serving globalist interests. And I warned a number of months ago that I was concerned about the moves being made to potentially conscript young people. And unfortunately, that's now played out. This is part of a bigger globalist agenda. The war drums are beating loudly, Natalie, and you're quite correct to highlight this article from the Daily Mail. They're also quite correct in what they're saying. Once young people go into that, they then can be drafted in very, very quickly and sent to fight the Russians, which is what I think they're proposing to do.
Right. The way they're selling it is like, hey, it's just summer camp. Like, just come after you finish high school. Just come and get a taste. See if you like it. Right. But, oh, now you have a military service number. Now we know who you are and where you're going to go next. In Russia, they do impose military education in primary school, but that is part of their culture. So if the UK wants to sell this as something that, is part of a culture, you need a whole cultural buy-in. You can't just, push this in under low military conscription. Why do you think military enrollment is so low in the UK right now?
Well, you just need to look at how they treat military veterans. Many of them are homeless, suffering from PTSD. They're left on the streets, whilst millions of migrants are given four-star class hotels and handouts and free mobile phones. They have no interest in looking after our military. The other thing that's very disturbing in all of this, though, is that the German defense minister recently called for conscription. And what we're actually witnessing, I believe, in the UK are globalist entities and sellouts like David Cameron, Richie Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, who are now enacting German defence policy here in the UK. And there is deep concern, indeed, from your channel that I was on yesterday. It's been watched by quite a number of people within the defence establishment. And I've been contacted by somebody who has passed some information to me. Whether I simply can't reveal the source, and whether it's absolutely 100% true, I cannot verify at this stage. But there is back channel communications going on that would suggest that Ursula von der Leyen and the EU Commission have now taken command and control of French nuclear weapons. If that is true, that is extremely serious and deeply alarming. And also, we know that through PESCO and military integration, Theresa May already agreed when she was Prime Minister to hand over command and control of British nuclear weapons. The British Army, the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, our intelligence apparatus being MI5, MI6, our listening post at Cheltenham, GCHQ, and control of our policing to the EU. Now, I want to say something, Natalie, because we have in this country something called the National Security Act. And it's very, very heavy in that if any person in government, even a serving British Prime Minister, who breaks the code of the National Security Act, where they are working for a hostile foreign power, whatever that might be, to the detriment of British people, or that causes harm knowingly or unknowingly to the British people, is at risk of being prosecuted by criminal prosecution, because it's effectively treason. It's in my opinion that Richie Sunak and many members of his cabinet have already broken the National Security Act. And what they are doing is enacting German defence policy here now in the United Kingdom. They are following a globalist control command centre that is not in the interests of the British people. We don't want to go to war, but we are being led there by those that are selling Britain short. And it will. It's the head of MI6, the head of MI5, the head of the London Metropolitan Police, or somebody in that structure that has the courage to take this on and run with it. Because the other big worry is that those people that's leading those particular institutions may indeed be compromised as well. The infiltration runs deep, and it's deeply concerning.
Right. Well, thank you for your perspective on this. I always appreciate it. You can follow Jim Ferguson UK on X. He always has a great perspective, and especially as the war drums continue to get louder, again, under the auspices of emergency. So thanks again for coming on Redacted.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye for now.
All right, so let us know what you think of that. Would you let your kid go to an Army boot camp? All of a sudden they're a veteran and they can get drafted? I'm a no. I'm a hard no on that. Yeah. To Army boot camp, just not as a trick again. So let us know how you feel about that and the creeping military. It's not even creeping anymore. The expanding military industrial complex. It's just there.
No, it's massive.
Yeah.
Now. Well, we need more bodies to throw into this military industrial complex. And we would love for you to check out our store. And we mentioned it earlier, but we have our new Redacted store information out right now. There you can see our No Farmers, No Food, redactedstore.com, our brand new t-shirts that we just rolled out today in solidarity with the farmers around the world who are being persecuted right now, those being arrested right now in Europe over the past 24 hours, multiple arrests of farmers who are protesting and bringing their tractors into Brussels and other capitals of countries, Berlin and Lithuania, in the Netherlands, and saying enough is enough. Stop trying to destroy our way of life. Again, go to redactedstore.com. Check out our new No Farmers, No Food t-shirt. I love that.
And I think that farmer actually worked on the Yellowstone Ranch. Kind of looks like.
Does look like it.
Pew, pew.
Pew, pew. That's right.
And the bird agrees.
The redacted bird. The redacted bird agrees.
Is it a boy bird or a girl bird?
It's a girl. Her name's Aria.
Oh, okay. Then I'm not the only girl around here. All right.
Right, so Aria the bird agrees.
She's ringing in here. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. That wraps up our week. We'll have content all throughout the weekend, but we'll be back on Monday live every Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The newsletter comes out in the morning, and we will see you again. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.